The 7th Legion, the Imperial Fist. Some of the coolest Space Marines you will ever come across, and I have a particular soft spot for them because my Black Templar are a successor chapter of the Imperial Fists. Made from the gene stock of one of the coolest Primarchs and the one with the most fun name to say, Dorn. Sounds like an onomatopoeia of like a hammer striking a big piece of metal. It's awesome. I love the Imperial Fist. They are masters of all forms of combat, but most specifically, siege warfare. In terms of heraldry, they wear yellow armor, yellow because they don't care if their enemies see them. In fact, they would prefer their enemies see them coming because that is how confident they are at victory. The Imperial Fists work really well with out-of-the-box Space Marine models. They adhere closely to the Codex Astartes, but they didn't start out as staunch loyalists. After the Horus Heresy, Dorn rejected Guilliman's order to break up his legion, which nearly led to a second civil war, but at the last moment he relented and his chapters have become some of the most staunchly loyal and rigid adherents to the Codex Astartes. For war gear, I want to pick the elements that I see as the most heavy duty. I gave my Fister the bolt gun with underslung grenade launcher, drilling out the barrels with my hobby pin vise. Gluing the weapon on as if he's arcing his shots over the castle walls. I glued on his power plant, and then for the ammo type, I couldn't pick anything but the drum mag. As masters of siege warfare, each Marine carries huge amounts of ammo as they don't know when a resupply is coming. For his shoulder pads, I picked one with a dangly Veteran's Crux and then a classic part number 69 shoulder pad. Although I do love the old Mark 7 Screamer helmet and beaky helmets, I do love the stoic face of the Mark 10 Primaris helmet. Now he's built, and really the clean Codex compliant armor is perfect for the Imperial Fists. I thought the perfect embellishment would be adding on a few more drum mags hanging from his belt. It's not overkill, it's being prepared. Now that I got my little Imperial Fist all put together, I've been thinking a lot about Imperial Fist lore, specifically fists. One very specific fist, the Hand of Dorn. Now canonically, the Primarch Dorn is dead, and to prove this, they have his fist. It was the only bit of him that was reclaimed. Now, does that mean he's officially 100% never ever gonna come back dead? Definitely not. I kinda guarantee that one day Dorn will return and he'll have a robot hand and it'll be business as usual. But I think there's a way cooler way to go about his return. Now, the traitor Primarch of the Alpha Legion, Alfarius or Omegon, was killed by Dorn. I think a really cool way to bring Dorn back into the world of Warhammer 40,000 would be to see the return of Alfarius or Omegon, and you see that they're missing a hand. It turns out it was all a great conspiracy concocted by the sneakiest dudes in all of Warhammer 40,000, and Dorn has been their prisoner for the last 10,000 years. It would be so cool, it would be so epic, all Space Marine chapters would come together in another great crusade to go rescue the captive Primarch, all according to Alfarius or Omegon's plan. It would be so incredibly cool. Almost as cool as the game aids available from today's sponsor. If you play 40k, you know the pain of these little cardboard tokens and constant measuring and arguing of who's standing close enough to get the point and who's not. Well, Objective Control is here to fix that problem. Their Kickstarter's loaded full of thematic objective control markers, with exciting designs to complement your army or terrain. With designs like Order, Jungle, Alien, Chaos, or even Plane. You can even get your logo custom printed for the perfect home field advantage. With these high-quality, durable plastic markers, your army will fit right in and you'll never doubt if you have Objective Control again. And that's not all. They also offer even more high-quality game aids. From custom movement control rulers to status tokens, deployment markers, and other useful tools. Objective Control is also offering adhesive magnetic stickers with matching STL bases to fit seamlessly alongside them to spice up your miniatures. Don't worry if you don't have your own 3D printer, these bases can be purchased from them directly as well. Follow the link in the description to find their Kickstarter. The more backers they get, the more exciting stretch goals get unlocked to bring even more awesome game aids and supplies to you. Now, what kind of a base would be best for an Imperial Fist? I think there's only one right answer, and that has to be a fortification. I took my Yellow Friends 32mm base and put on some 1/4-inch cork, tearing it so it fills up the base and left one side completely square. Then I took another triangular piece and cut one side flat so that these two pieces will form a little wall. I want to sink some rebar into this wall, so for my first try, I carefully sliced the cork like I sliced my hot dog buns, leaving the edge intact so I could open it up like a book. Then I tore a little window in the middle, which I filled with some Army Painter barbed wire. I cut 1/2-inch sections of this and carefully slid them inside the cut of my cork, making a little grid that I locked down with ultra-thin superglue. Now I have a little shell hole in the floor with exposed rebar reinforcement. I glued down the floor permanently, and now for the upright part. I used my hobby saw to cut the cork in half. This worked much better than slicing it with my hobby knife. With the wall cut open, I tore off the top of my triangle and then slid in my scale rebar. Then I brought back in my 2 little triangles of cork, loading up glue and then adding on my horizontal rebar. I applied a little bit more glue and then squished the 2 halves together like a sandwich, like my classic egg salad sandwiches. I poured on more ultra thin super glue to make sure the rebar and cork wasn't going anywhere, and I trimmed up the wire. My Space Marine is going to look like he's giving a heroic last stand in a bombed out bunker. To make the cork look like concrete, I took some Tamiya basic putty and spread this on with a popsicle stick. The texture left behind from the wood makes for a very realistic finish to the walls. Then I poured on some scenic glue, brushing it into a few key spots, and I sprinkled on some sand. All these simple elements work together to give me a very convincing wall, and for ease of painting, I'm going to paint my boy separate from the base. I primed both in black and then gave the Marine a coat of pink through the airbrush. Yes, he will be yellow, but the pink is important. I sprayed white paint from above, leaving the pink behind on the underside and in all the recesses. Now for the yellow. And Games Workshop makes a color called Imperial Fists, and it just so happens to be yellow. I thinned this color down 50-50 with contrast paint medium and then brushed it on everywhere. Over the white, it looks like a nice saturated yellow, and over the pink, it changes to an orangey color, giving some very nice shading without getting too dark or turning brown. Now I've got the color I want, but I want to shade all the recesses. For this, I watered down some Reikland Flesh Shade 50-50 and put this over my Marine, letting it fill in all the nooks and crannies. All these steps have made my Marine a little dark, so I brought him back up with the dry brushing of yellow. And this had the added benefit of hitting all the raised parts of his armor and leaving the recesses nice and dark. For his weapon, I painted it with rattling grime. This is why I didn't airbrush the yellow. I didn't want to have to repaint his gun white. I also put this grime over his gun straps, extra ammo, and in the in-between parts of his armor. I dry brushed all these rattling grime parts with a silver paint, and then I used red speed paint on his chest aquila. It was really hard to reach this, so the wateriness of the speed paint helped the paint flow into those behind the gun parts. I've got the base coats all done on my Imperial Fist, and I've been thinking about the crunch of the Imperial Fist. They have a detachment built around them called Anvil Siege Force. And this one is a little bit of a head scratcher. It took me a little while to figure out exactly what to do with it. It gives every single ranged weapon in your army the heavy keyword. And that's not bad. Heavy is if you hold still, you get +1 to hit. But it has another rider attached to it where if your gun already had heavy, then you get +1 to wound. That's not bad, but a little bit situational. I can only think of 3 Space Marine units that would really get the most out of this army rule. Number 1 is Eradicators, the Melta guys, and they definitely could, but they have kind of short range guns that get really good if you get really close. So they want to be moving and probably not going to want to hold still. So that kind of leaves Heavy Intercessors and Eliminators. Heavy Intercessors are pretty cheap at 100 points, and getting +1 to hit and +1 to wound definitely helps them punch well above their weight class. And Eliminators, an often overlooked unit because they kinda suck, but sniper rifles, the las fusils, are essentially las cannons. Las cannons hitting on +1 and wounding on +1, all of a sudden that could be pretty darn good for a little 80-point unit. The Anvil Siege Force seems to be built around a playstyle of taking a few big bricks of some of the toughest things the Space Marines have available to them, marching them to the center line, and then holding the line. Just sitting there, getting their +1 to hit, and just blasting, taking damage, and hopefully not dying. And speaking of not dying, really when I was reading about the Imperial Fists, the thing that stuck out to me most is a really exciting character called Tor Garradon. Tor is a named captain in Gravis armor with the biggest power fist in all of Warhammer 40,000. It's a big power fist, and it gets even better when it's punching a vehicle or monster, or fortification. It is 5 attacks, hitting on 2s, strength 14, AP -4, damage flat 4. That is a piece of war gear. Oh, that power fist is giving off theme music as it walks its way up the board. And honestly, I kind of want to build like a Black Templar one for my army and just every now and then run an Imperial Fist army so that I can have that fist. And speaking of fists, it's time to finish up this Imperial Fist. I painted the rim of the Space Marine's shoulder pad black, and to highlight the black, I picked a few small spots to paint with a few layers of dark gray, making the gradients up to a mid-tone gray. As long as these spots are small, it'll still look nice and black, and I did a few little edge highlights on these spots too. Then for his head, it always helps to do a little something special on the head, and I painted a white stripe running down over his forehead. Once I got it fully white, I painted on some battle damage, so it looks like the white paint has been chipped away, revealing the yellow underneath. Then for his battle line arrow, I thought the arrow on the decal sheet was a little too small, so I freehanded a nice big black arrow that dominates his shoulder pad, finishing it off with the same yellow chips and scratches as on his forehead. Then I put gloss paint over his right shoulder in preparation for some decals. I really like this one with the laurel wreath. I cut it out and let it soak for 1 minute on my wet palette sponge, and I dripped on some microsol, which softens the plastic, which is important for getting a big old decal like this to go over a round shoulder pad. I slid it onto his shoulder and then crushed it down with a wad of damp paper towel. Decals don't stretch, so the only way to get them to conform to strange shapes is to get them to fold in on themselves. Then I put a few more layers of gloss paint to hide the plastic edge of the decal. And then I gave it a coat of matte medium, adding a few little yellow scratches. Then it came my favorite part of the whole process. I took some warm white paint and stippled this all over the model. Usually I would sponge this on, but I want to be a little bit more precise with it, doing some edge highlights, building up scratches on his arms and backpack, and making some larger scrapes on his armor. This was really fun, and I might have to give this a try more often. Now the only thing left is his eyes. I picked them out with white paint and then gave them a coat of Ghillie Dhu, my favorite sci-fi green paint. Oh, the Imperial Fists. They're like the Black Templar, but not evil. Like the Imperial Fists do their crusading, but they also love a good parade. Where the Black Templar, the chainsaws never stop swinging. I really had a good time painting up this yellow guy, but I'm really excited for this base because it really turned out, and I want to see what it looks like painted up. I loaded up my big dry brush with gray paint and brushed and stippled this all over, covering about 80% of the black. Then I went in with a lighter gray and dry brushed this, leaving it behind on about 50% of the base, and then I did the same dry brushing of white paint, hitting mostly the edges and cracks, covering about 20%. All these colors work together to make a really nice desolate ruin. Now for the rebar. One tool I haven't used in a while is Dirty Down Rust. I painted this over all the metal and then made a few little drippies coming down from the walls. What's nice about this paint is it's water soluble, so once it was dry I ran over these drips again to feather them out and make them look more natural. Then I hit the rim of the base with my gloss black apple barrel paint and glued on my Marine. Seeing it all together, he looks a little bit too clean on a dirty base, so I dry brushed some watered down gray over his feet to make him look like he's been marching through the battlefield for a while. When you Google Imperial Fist armies and you see them all spread out, it looks really, really good, and I think there's a reason for that. Imperial Fists are dominated by the color yellow. They're like 99% yellow. And maybe that makes for slightly boring models individually, but I've definitely found with my armies, I try really, really hard on every single guy and making them absolutely perfect, but that kind of makes each individual model really busy, and so when I get them all set up for a group shot, it kind of looks muddy. It's hard to tell where one model starts and another model ends. But when you've got simplicity like the Imperial Fists, it reminds me a lot of armies like Tyranids or Necrons, where they're super simple and their color schemes are just really, really limited in their palette, and so I feel like it looks really, really good in an army shot. It's a really, really fun little experiment and an adventure I went on with this Imperial Fist, and I really have been enjoying it. So let me know in the comments below what Space Marine chapter I should look at next. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and as always, thanks for watching.